Since the dawn of time, mankind has been irritated by things. Hiccups, an itch that you can't quite reach, homework, tuning in to hear one YuGiTuber and instead hearing someone completely different. These are just a few of the many irritating things we've all experienced at one time or another. Just as it is with life itself, there are irritating things in YuGiOh as well. That's why today TheDuelLogs is counting down the top 10 most irritating cards to have ever tainted the inside of a pack.
Number 10, Inspector Border. This card kind of has a confusingly worded effect, but basically, if there are no extra deck, Pendulum, or Ritual monsters on the field, neither player can activate any monster effects. And what's unique about this card is this lockdown is set for everywhere, not just the field. It prevents players from using hand traps, cards from the graveyard, and even the odd card from the deck. It's just a complete shutdown of monster effects. It's also easy to bring out, only requires you to not have any monsters to summon it, and it has a high attack and defense of 2,000 each, so it's a hard wall to beat over without using monster effects to go into bigger monsters. But if you do manage to get an extra deck monster, Pendulum, or Ritual monster on the field, you are then allowed to use one monster effect per card. So having one Link monster out means you get one monster effect per turn. Having a Link and a Pendulum means you get two monster effects, and so on and so on. So there is ways to play around its lockdown by simply going into special summoned monster types. It's just this card is also usually played in stun decks, and try to stop these cards from hitting the field, making this card really annoying to play against, but not unstoppable. Number 9, Evenly Matched. The ultimate going second card. Did you spend 10 minutes building your perfect, unbreakable board? Well, better hope you have a negate ready, because Evenly Matched can completely destroy just about any board by simply entering the battle phase and ending it without putting any cards out. Evenly Matched has the effect where, at the end of the battle phase, your opponent must banish their own cards face down until they control the same number of cards you do. And also, if you control no cards in the field, you can activate this card from your hand. And if used this way, that forces your opponent to banish all but one card on their side of the field. Evenly Matched is such the ultimate board wipe that some decks run cards specifically designed to stop trap cards just to save themselves from this one card. Number 8, the Sea Turtle Kaiju. Kaijus are the ultimate monster removal tool, as their very mechanic of summoning allows you to tribute any card your opponent controls to give it to your opponent. And since so few cards have protection from being tributed, it can get over nearly all of the popular boss monsters that are normally impossible to get rid of in other ways. And the reason Sea Turtle is ran the most over the other Kaijus, who all technically do the exact same thing, is because he has the lowest attack of 2200. You see, you get rid of your opponent's monster by giving them the Kaiju, so you want to use the weakest one possible, with the second weakest one having 2400 attack, the strongest having 3300. The Kaijus all have pretty high attack, but basically giving your opponent a 2200 beat stick is a lot easier to get over than a full powered towers or sleeper. And of course, if you're the player who spent a ton of resources setting up a boss monster, then you're not gonna like being given a Kaiju. Also, I should add Spear Mode here as well, since it basically does the same thing, only Spear Mode can tribute 3 monsters. So it does see a little more play in the meta that is all about setting up big boards of monsters, as it can tribute 3 of those hard to kill monsters and ruin your opponent's day. Number 7, Herald of Perfection. This card has the effect where if your opponent activates a card effect of any type, you can discard a fairy type monster from your hand to negate that card's effect and destroy it. An opponent with this card out and 5 fairy type monsters in their hand can basically stop you from playing the game. Even though it's a ritual monster, it's easy to bring out. It has a really nice defense of 2800, making it almost impossible to take out without using some kind of effect to bring out a strong monster. And to top it off, even its ritual summoning card can let you add a fairy type monster back to your hand. The only way to get over Herald of Perfection is to just keep activating cards until your opponent eventually runs out of fairies in their hand, and then maybe have a way to remove the card after exhausting your resources. Or use a Kaiju to easily get over it and not deal with that headache. Number 6, the Solemn Brigade. Solemn Judgment has the effect where if your opponent tries to do basically anything, activate a card effect or summon a monster, you can pay half your life points to stop it and destroy that card. Solemn Warning has the effect where if your opponent activates a card that would summon a monster, or normal summons a monster, you can pay 2,000 life points to negate the summon and destroy that card. And Solemn Strike has the effect where if your opponent would special summon a monster, or use a monster effect, you can pay 1,500 life points to negate the card and destroy it. Now, for those of you who probably aren't familiar with the Solemn Brigade, you might be wondering why paying so many life points to only stop one card could be considered a good thing or annoying. Well, because if used strategically, that one negate can win you the game. That negate is so good that 2 of them are limited to 1, with Solemn Judgment being a banned card for years until recently. And the fact that they only require you to pay life points means they're more versatile than, say, Herald of Perfection, which requires your whole deck to be built around it to use its negates, whereas the Solemn Brigade can just be splashed into any deck to make it stronger or give it clutch negates. So while it does take skill to know your opponent's deck well enough to know when to use one of the Solemn cards at the right time, if it's used on you at the perfect moment during a combo, it can just stop you dead and leave you open for a kill on your next turn, making them very feared cards. Number 5. Toadally Awesome. When your opponent activates a card effect, you can send an Aqua-type monster from your field or hand to the graveyard to negate that card, destroy it, and if you want, set that card to your side of the field so you can use it. Now, Toadally Awesome is super easy to bring out in Paleo Frog decks, as it just requires 2 Aqua-type monsters, and a deck that can swarm the field with those kinds of monsters the easiest. And on top of that, Toadally Awesome can bring out a frog during your opponent's turn to have an extra card for its negates, and it floats on death. But luckily, its negate is only once per turn, and its attack of 2200 isn't the hardest thing in the world to get over. This card is more annoying for its ease of access, ability to shut down by negating a key card, and its recoverability when you do finally manage to get rid of it. Number 4. Masked Hero Dark Law. While this card is out, all cards your opponent control will be banished instead of going to the graveyard, and if they search a card, you get to randomly discard 1 card from their hand, turning a plus into a hand neutral at most. But what also makes this card annoying on top of its lockdown effects is that it's easy to bring out. A single Hero Lives can bring out a Dark Law without even using your normal summon for that turn. And if you're using Mass Change on your Shadow Mist during your opponent's turn, you can even plus off of its summon. Its ease of access, decent sized body for its lockdown effect at 2400 means that even if you do get rid of one, another one will be back soon and easily as well. Some of the most annoying lockdown cards are the ones that do great things on the field and can be brought out easily and often, and I think both Dark Law and Toadally Awesome fit those criteria perfectly. Number 3 is probably the most played card in the game at the moment, and that's of course Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. Ash Blossom is part of the new wave of monster effects that activate in the hand during both players' turns, and usually in response to something to try and stop it. These monster effects have been dubbed by the community as hand traps, despite the most popular of them, like Ash, not actually being trap cards. What Ash Blossom does is allow you to negate the effect of a card which has the effect to do one of 3 things. Either search out a card from the deck, special summon a monster from the deck, or mill a card from the deck. And because all 3 of those situations are pretty common from top decks, especially searching cards from the deck, that means Ash Blossom sees the most play out of all of the hand traps, as stopping one key search can completely shut down your opponent's turn and stop them mid-combo. And having multiple copies in your hand is akin to stopping your opponent from playing at all during their turn, and without having any trap cards on the field. Because of how useful these hand traps are, more and more people just straight up stop playing conventional trap cards in favor of just using hand traps instead. Number 2. Macrocosmos, and to a lesser extent, Dimensional Fissure. Macrocosmos has the effect that as long as it's face up on the field, all cards get banished instead of going to the graveyard. Since most decks use the graveyard as a resource, denying your opponent the graveyard completely shuts down a majority of decks. Dimensional Fissure is a similar spell card which banishes all monsters instead of all cards like Cosmos. These 2 cards in conjunction were so good at stopping decks from playing they both are currently limited as they're too strong of floodgates that, unlike Dark Law, can be splashed into just about any deck that doesn't need its graveyard. Despite Dark Law technically having a better effect since it's a macrocosmos only for your opponent, the ease of use of cards greatly increases their effectiveness. As a side note, when I decided to get back into the game back in 2013, I hadn't actually played the game in about 4 years at that point, and just looked up a ban list online and adjusted my old Macro Monarch deck to be up to date and went to a locals event. Even though I didn't know what all the new cards were and hadn't played in years, I was still able to win half of my games due to the fact that I ran 3 copies of Macrocosmos and Dimensional Fissure, and those cards were just as an effective floodgate as they used to be back in the day. Number 1. Skill Drain. This card has the effect that, at the cost of 1000 life points to activate it, all monster effects on the field are negated. Now, since it only affects monsters on the field, you can still use hand traps and graveyard effects, but stopping all effects on the field is such a powerful effect that this card is the reason I always run spell and trap card removal. I just can't take the chance that I'll auto lose to a single skill drain, and because it's such a good effect, the card is currently limited. When this card was still at 3, it was the bane of my existence when I used to test my gimmick decks on Yu-Gi-Oh! Pro. For some reason, so many people ran this card when playing at the casual level on Dev Pro. I lost so many games to this one card because I didn't draw into my MST, that I still have a special place of hate for this card, even if hardly anyone uses it anymore since it's harder to build a deck around it now with it only being at 1 copy. And that's why I think Skill Drain is the most irritating card in the game. That isn't banned, of course. I kinda left all those cards off the list as they could take up their own list entirely.
Alright, well that's it for this video. If you like what you heard, be sure to subscribe for more irritating content and click the bell. And if you have any other ideas, be sure to leave them down in the comments where DuelLogs will pretend to read them. And if you liked my voice and you'd like to hear more of it, well too bad, because this is my only appearance on this channel, and I'm not telling you who I am. Take that, nerds! Do you think that's irritating enough? Maybe too irritating? I mean, I know it's supposed to be the theme of the video, but I'm a little worried I might come off as like a jerk, and then no one will want to subscribe to either of our channels. Just a thought. I mean, obviously, and you know, obviously don't include any of this stuff at the end here. Breaking the fourth wall in a video like this can be kind of irritating.